Welcome to math class. Today we are going to apply cross-multiplying into one of the biggest uses for it. Anytime you travel to another country, you can't pay with American money most often because they have their own currency. So we're going to have to try to convert it to foreign currencies and see how much we have. Right? So when you travel, honestly, a lot of us might go to one of the closest countries to us. The two closest countries to the U.S. are Canada and Mexico. Okay. Raise your hand if you've been to Canada. Did I get you? I can't see if you're raising your hand. Most of us have been to Canada. It's right there. It's half an hour away. We take the drive to Niagara Falls. What currency do each of these countries use? Okay. Canada has the Canadian dollar. Oops. If I can spell Canadian dollar. And Mexico uses pesos. Right? So if you're going to this country, if you're going just over the border, a lot of places at Niagara Falls also accept American money because we're so close. But the further into Canada you go, you're more likely going to need to use their currency. All right, so when you travel, you want to exchange American dollars into foreign currencies. Right now, one US dollar can turn into $1.31 Canadian because the US dollar is worth a little bit more than a Canadian dollar is. Okay, so one of our exchange rates is one US dollar over $1.31 in Canadian. That's the exchange rate. Okay, for Mexico, one US dollar can turn into about 21.79 pesos. Okay? Why is there such a big difference? Because right now, the US economy is still stronger than the Mexican economy. So one US dollar is worth more, so it can turn into more pesos. Okay? If your economy is stronger than another country's, your currency tends to be worth a little bit more than theirs. So right now, the U.S., our dollars can turn into more pesos. It can turn into more Indian rupees. It can turn into more, I even think Chinese yuan. But countries that we might be behind, if you're going to Europe, I think if you take one U.S. dollar, you get less euros because their economy is strong right now. So one US dollar might turn into 80 euro cents. Okay, so you don't have as much buying power when you're there. Right? So when we go to convert these, we're going to set up two fractions. And however you set up the first fraction, you have to match it in the second one. So my first fraction is US on top, Canada on bottom. My second fraction should be US on top, Canada on bottom. Okay? And the first one we set up should always be our exchange rate. One US dollar is $1.31 Canadian, or one US dollar is 21.79 in Mexican pesos. Okay, so I'll show you what I mean. The first one says, how much is $50 worth if you go to Mexico? So 50 US dollars in Mexico is worth how much? First, I'm going to start with the Mexican exchange rate. One US dollar is 21.79 in Mexico. So I'm doing US over Mexico, which means this fraction has to be US over Mexico. Okay, one US dollar is 21.79 in Mexican. So 50 US dollars is what I want to try and find. If I have 50 US dollars, how many pesos would that turn into in Mexico? Okay, so the first one's our exchange rate. The second one, we plug in how much money we have. So now all I have to do is cross multiply. 1 times x is 1x. 50 US dollars times 21.79. If I do 50 times 21.79, I would have 1,089.5 pesos. Okay, 1,089.5. Normally with money we do 2 decimal places, so don't just leave it 0.5, we're going to call it 0.50. Okay, so that's how many pesos I would have. So you have more buying power in Mexico. Some of you may have seen this if your family's taken a cruise, and let's say you're somewhere in the Caribbean, one of the islands like Jamaica, Puerto Rico, something like that. If you go into some of those towns, you might find t-shirts for super cheap. And they might even sell it to you for American dollars. Where they're like, oh, this is only $2 American. And you're like, oh my gosh, it's a steal. Of course I'll buy it. It's $2 American for you, but for them, $2 can turn into a lot more of their currency. Okay, so a lot of times if you go on vacation, you might see they're selling things for super cheap in American dollars because to them it might turn into 10, 15, 20 pesos, Jamaican currency, anything like that. Right? So now let's see, if we go to Canada, 50 US dollars would turn into how much Canadian? Now I've got to use the Canadian exchange rate. 1 US dollar is $1.31 in Canada. So I want to see 50 US dollars is how much in Canada? Oops. So again, if I'm doing US over Canada here, I have to do US over Canada here. This one's the exchange rate. This one is how much money I really have. How much does it turn into? If I cross multiply these, I get X equals whatever 50 times 131 is. 50 times 1.31. I get 65.5 Canadian dollars. Again, we don't want to leave one decimal because money should always be 2. So I'm going to call it 65.50 Canadian dollars. Right? So when we're setting this up, exchange rate first, and then whatever real money you have goes in the second fraction. So we'll try and set a couple of these up. It says, how much would $112.96 US be worth in Canada? Sometimes when you travel, you might not have an exact amount because let's say you traveled in Europe, you spent a bunch of money, they give you change back. When you come back, you're going to try and change that European money back to American dollars so you can use it again. So it won't always be perfect numbers that are up here. Right? So let's find one where they give us, here. You're returning from a trip to Mexico with 287.43 pesos. I want to see how much American money that's left over. So I'm still going to do 1 US dollar is 21.79 Mexican pesos. If you don't remember the exchange rates, just go back a page. They're there for you. Okay, so 1 US is this much in Mexico. So how many US dollars do I get if I brought home 287.43 pesos? Okay, so this one flipped on us a little bit. I had US over Mexico. Before I knew what the US amount was, we had 50 US dollars that I was exchanging, so I put a 50 here. But now I don't know how much US money I have. I know how many pesos I have, so I plug that number in, but the US money is my X now. Okay, when I cross multiply, this one's going to be an extra step because I get 287.43 pesos equals 21.79x. Right? To solve this out, divide by 21.79, divide by 21.79. Okay, this one's definitely a calculator problem. No one can do that in their head. If they can, I'm very impressed. I can even remember what the numbers were. 287.43, 287 or 0.43 divided by 21.79. Okay, we're coming home with 13.1909132.6. Should I keep all those decimals if it's money? No. I round to 2 decimal places. So this would be $13.19. Okay, so you may think you're coming home with a lot. Like, oh, I have 287 left over. When you turn it back to American, that's only $13. Okay, so when you're traveling, make sure you have enough money when you come back. Let's say you fly into the airport and you need to take an Uber or Lyft home or a taxi. If you come back thinking you have plenty of money for the taxi and you only have $13, depending on how far you live, you might not be able to make it back home in the taxi ride. Okay, so make sure you don't overspend when you're overseas. Right? Same thing. In Canada, let's say I'm coming back from Canada with $89.20 in Canadian money. I want to see how much that is in American. If I do $1 US over $1.31 Canadian, that equals how many US dollars over $89.20 in Canadian? Okay, cross multiply those. I get 1.31x equals 89.20. If you divide by 1.31, put it in the calculator. 89.20 divided by 1.31. We're coming back with about $68.09 and cents. $68.09. Okay. Now here, if you're exchanging money, there's going to be certain businesses that'll exchange money for you, but they're doing it to try and make a profit. Okay, we won't go into all the math of this, but make sure you look at places before you just exchange willy-nilly, because some of them are going to take more money away from you. So let's say the exchange rate is $1.32 for Canadian. If you go to one of these places, they might say the rate is $1.29. So when you exchange, every dollar you exchange, they're keeping about 3 Canadian cents of it, so that they're making some money. Okay? So if you go to one of your local banks, they'll exchange it. So you can look up what the exchange rates are. If you try to exchange money in an airport, okay, they might be doing something like this, so they make a little bit of a profit off of it. All right, so whenever you travel, you want to do your research to make sure you're not getting gypped. All right, have a good one.